Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about the Pitt Season 2 Episode 7. It is 1 PM and spoilers for the episode as always. This is a Patreon sponsored review, so thank you very much to Alison for making the pick. So, another big episode here, big turning point, and we're kind of in the middle of the season now, so that makes a lot of sense. But by the end of this one, we actually find out what's going on at the other hospital and find out that it's happened to now 2 hospitals and that things are going to have to change at the Pitt to try and accommodate in case it happens there. That being a cyber attack, which I laughed quite a bit because I think it's Princess who looks very happy when this is announced, because I think that's what she maybe guessed for the betting pool, and I think that's quite funny. But yeah, I mean, this is the end that I'm skipping to here, but I mean, it's the big headline, I suppose, coming out of this one, so let's get it out of the way. I was talking about this last episode and saying how they've been building it up a little bit, and they've been talking about how we still don't know what's going on over there, and we still don't know what's happening. I like that they kind of like skirted the line, because my concern is that if it was something super big, like someone's attacked the hospital, it would be on the news, and they should have heard it via other channels by now. I actually think this was like the perfect thing, because it's a big deal, and it's going to really shake up what happens with the rest of the season, but it also is something that I can buy wouldn't have went public yet, because it's the sort of thing where they would try and keep it internal as much as possible, because it is something very serious and they don't want to panic people, and it's not something that's immediately obvious to the outside world. So I think cyber attack makes the most sense, and so a second hospital's had it, and there's a ransom apparently, as we find out from the owner of the hospital, which is I mean, that part's a little bit weird to me, that there's an owner of the hospital. I don't think there's owners of hospitals in the UK, but that's obviously because the healthcare system is very different. But yeah, some rich guy in his shorts comes down and explains that this is happening. But the fallout of this, the potential of this, is quite interesting. Because the big thing they do right at the end of the episode is that they say to protect the hospital from this happening to the Pitt, and not just the Pitt, obviously the entire building, they're turning off all the computers. They're turning off all the tech so that nothing can be hacked, to just make it completely safe, and it means they're going analog, to the point where they, like, Robbie yells out, because it's about to go down, someone get a photograph of the board, and Whitaker gets it, so they can start working from that. But they're going analog. They're going to have to write all this shit down now. So this is great for 2 reasons. One, it's great because it's a new challenge that's very different to anything they've done before in the show, right? And it's going to force them to get back to basics in some ways, which is really cool. I can see that causing some issues, especially for the younger characters who have never worked in a hospital without all that tech. Maybe some of the older characters, like, you know, obviously computers have been around for a long time in some form. Even Robbie, I'm sure there was some early computers around when he started being a doctor, but he probably remembers when it wasn't as reliant than it is now. So I can see some interesting stuff coming from that. So just the potential pitfalls and the problem solving and the working around it is going to freshen things up. So that's the good point number one. The second good point about all this is the themes and the carryover this has from something we've already been doing all season, and that is Dr. Al and her AI bullshit. All of a sudden, all that AI bullshit means jack shit. It means nothing. They can't use it now because all of the computers can't be used. So, all of a sudden, everything you've been pushing for has become irrelevant, and we have to work without it. And, you know, like, you know, I like that. You know, it does focus on her reaction for a second during this, for a couple of reasons, admittedly. Part of it's also because Robbie's pissed that he wasn't told this before it was announced to everyone, and it turns out it was told to her. She was treated as the one in charge today, not him, and he's a bit miffed by that. So it does cut to a reaction during that. So I like this ending a lot. I think it's an exciting direction for the season to go in. It's very different from the situation we had last season. There's still reasons for lots of extra patients because this other hospital's down. And then the second hospital that's down, they say that their patients are going to a fourth hospital. You know, one that's closer to that second hospital. So it's not necessarily affecting this hospital directly, but it does mean that this is not ending anytime soon. It's still going to be going on for a while. And now we've got this new hurdle to overcome, which again, for the younger doctors who have only known the current system, that's probably going to be extra difficult. So a lot of exciting stuff, I feel like, coming from that, which is really cool. So I like what this has turned out to be a lot. I think it's a nice direction to go on. But obviously that's the end of the episode. There's lots of other things to talk about, lots of characters to talk about. I think first off, I think the main focal point of the episode, I think, is probably the sexual assault victim. It's one of those ones where the second they mentioned it and we start following Dana, like getting the information before we even meet the patient, I think I really like the direction here because it actually treated it with like a fair bit of build up, and it's not even that much time in reality. It's like 30 seconds. But just watching and sort of like, there's literally a moment where Dana has to slide a curtain to reveal the victim, and then like sort of, then we're in the scene with the victim. I think the build up to that is really effective, because I was actually finding myself like my heart sinking a little bit and going, oh god, this is going to be depressing, this episode. And last episode was pretty depressing because of Louis dying. This was a whole different kind of depressing. But that little build up made me dread it a little bit, right? It made me dread the topic we were about to have to tackle, and it made me dread kind of the, and not dread the person. Like, you feel bad for the person, but obviously for everyone involved, this is a very delicate situation. And Dana's trained, they call it a saint, a nurse who's trained to actually do the kit and all that, and sort of do all the first response stuff with someone who's been through this, take all the right, samples and so on, ask all the right questions, and Emma's there to sort of assist. And I think the way they handled the build up to this was good, like I said, because of that just that enough time to sort of sink in what we're about to do and how we're going to have to treat it. But then also simple things like when they were making her having to undress because they have to take her clothes in, they have to put her in a gown and so on. I really liked the fact that they didn't, or I'll phrase it another way. I was worried for a split second, because this show is not shied away from nudity in the past, right? There's someone on the surgery table and their junk's hanging out, or and it's always medical, it's always clinical, it's never anything but that. Aside from maybe when that guy pissed in Whitaker, that was a bit more like shock value, I guess. But for the most part, it's very clinical. It's never done for titillation or anything like that. So I would never expect that. But there was a moment in my head where I thought here, oh, I hope they don't show anything here. I really, because it doesn't feel right because of the topic. It feels like we should be more delicate about this and more understanding. And to its credit, I think the direction nailed that, where even the characters in the scene, like, Dana's holding up a sheet at one point, Emma's kind of behind a curtain, and we kind of focus on Emma just sort of quietly standing there. And there's like a little out of focus stuff going on in the background, but it's this idea that she's not looking. And there is just kind of this like, quiet, uncomfortable feeling to everything of like going through the motions and everyone's doing the right thing. And, Dana's like assuring the person over and over again, hey, we'll take a break anytime you want, it's your choice to report or not, but we should do this so you've got this for later if you decide to report, and so on. She's saying all of the right things, and she's been very understanding to the hesitation of the victim at every point, and so on. So, like, you go through this process, and I think all of the elements of it are handled very well, right? And there's obviously a lot of, like, answering questions and, like, can you describe kind of the circumstances? And we never get the exact circumstances of the assault itself, but kind of the day, and that it was like a sort of 4th of July barbecue, and, people were drunk, and ultimately, she's sort of going through everything. And a couple of moments that I really liked, how this was done, is one when this other person comes in from, I can't remember what the organization was called, but it was someone who's here to sort of help, I don't know if counselor is the right word, but she comes in, and Dana's the one that's actually been with her the whole time. And there's a little moment here when this woman's saying, hey, can I ask some questions or whatever, where the victim's very quiet, And like Dana kind of like gives her a little look, and it's almost like she's sort of grown to trust Dana a little bit, and it was like Dana was trying to encourage her to do, the right thing here. Not that anyone would blame her for being scared here or not wanting to, but just this idea of like giving her that little extra push to try and, because she might regret not, pursuing something, or at least doing what she needs to do in the moment right now for later down the line. And I think that moment was really good because it was, again, really, obviously last episode focused heavily on the nurses. I think Dana's got another blinder here. I think Dana in this episode is shown to be essential, to be caring. And then that's obviously capped off with the other moment that's hard not to love is towards the end when the victim says she wants to stop just as they're getting samples from her vagina. I'm trying to think of the nice way of saying it, but whatever, it doesn't matter. She says she wants to stop, and she kind of breaks down and tries to kind of justify why it happened. Like she's, I don't know if denial is the right word, but she's like, oh, I know who he is. He's a friend, which, this is a weird thing to hear her say, of course, but she's trying to talk herself down. She's trying to talk herself into thinking, oh, it's not that big a deal. And Dana never, disagrees with her. Dana never argues with her. Dana never tries to, contradict her in any way. She just listens and says, we can take a break. We can, she just tries to kind of navigate what she's saying. And she's like, how about you, go take a walk. I'll be here when you get back for whatever you decide. And Emma takes her to go, maybe get a snack or something. And Dana breaks down afterwards. Dana breaks down and kind of starts crying when she leaves the room. And, it's kind of what we were talking about last episode a little bit about how some people who are in this industry, really, is industry even the right word for healthcare? I don't know. Is it an industry? I guess it kind of is. It's in America, I suppose. But she cares, right? She has empathy, and this is, she the reason why she obviously this is tough to do. It's tough to be the person that the victim has to look at in the worst, day or day after the worst day of their lives or whatever. And she has to be there. She has to see potentially a lot. She's probably seen a lot of victims in her time because she is the trained nurse on staff to deal with this, and the others can't, right? They've not been trained to do this. Presumably this is something that is largely something that only the female nurses do. I mean, I suppose there's maybe an equivalent, maybe there's male nurses trained for when there's a male victim. I mean, I guess that's probably how that works. But she's encouraging Emma to hey, more nurses should train to do this particular thing because it's, it's needed. Which is, is a nice moment in and of itself. And Emma's been shown to care. I think that was the big thing at the end of the last episode is that Emma does have empathy, so maybe she will want to be there. And but it's kind of thankless. It's tough, right? It's heartbreaking for her. And I think particularly towards the end of this here, and the bit that happens right before she breaks down and cries when she's on her own. Now, she might have had this reaction regardless of how this ended, but I do think that this girl's 180 here, trying to talk herself out of needing to pursue any kind of justice and trying to convince herself that it's not a big deal and nothing really that bad happened, that it's not his fault. I think that's really what makes her break here at the end. And I think it's one because it's just sad in general, right, to hear her say these things. But I think for her particularly, Dana, is that she's probably heard a variation of this before. Probably a lot of times. And that's maybe part of what's so sad about it is, and I can't say that for sure, but it seems like maybe this is a sort of rationale or a part of the accepting or denial process that a lot of victims probably go through. So, I mean, all of this was heartbreaking. All of this was obviously gut-wrenching, but in a very different way than to normal. Because normally it's you get gut-wrenched in this show usually because someone might die or because someone might lose a loved one. This was very different. This was someone's coming in and going through this process and the bad things already happened, and it's just about kind of the fallout of it. So this is them tackling yet another subject related to healthcare, and this show likes to do that. And I think this was handled with some depth, and I think it's I think it's a good plot line. I think it's very notable that even because it'd be one thing if there was some indirect scenes with some male characters, but there isn't, right? You know, like it's the forgive me, I don't know her name, but the lady out front who like gives Dana the intel up front, and it's Dana and Emma who go in to see her, and then this other woman shows up to talk to her. At no point does a man even talk about this patient or case, right? And that wouldn't be a big deal necessarily, you know, if like Robbie just asked for an update from Dana at some point or whatever, right? Like it makes sense that no men go to see her, but I think it's a nice touch that it's never the case never even comes in contact with any of the male characters. I think that's a very you know intentional choice they've made to show that it's mainly women dealing with this, and I just you know it's an interesting choice which I like. So. Yeah. So yeah, I honestly like I'm finding it hard to find words to sort of like add the gravitas to this that it deserves. It's you know it's a tough topic to talk about in general. I think it's tough to talk about it from my perspective. Only that it does make me sad and angry whenever this really comes up in any kind of serious way, where it feels real. And I'll leave it there. But it's you know. Anyway, I'm having a human moment myself. So, elsewhere, what will we talk about? Let's talk about. Hey, Santos is always a good point of discussion. In this show, she kind of darts around a little bit this episode. She's still trying to do her charting. She is doing a good job in the operating rooms or in the trauma rooms. Dr. Al, says as much a couple times to her. She's not on her back for charting. She's just wanted to say good job. So that's, I guess, nice for her. She's also frustrated that the baby keeps crying and kind of reveals that she's got a little talent for calming the baby down by singing. Although, honestly, the most relatable Santos has ever been is the moment when she's left alone with the baby, and she just kind of turns and looks with this little moment of horror in her face, and I'm like, you know what, Santos, I relate to you right now. I get this part. I get how you're feeling. And then she starts singing though, and actually makes the baby stop crying. So she actually has the skill in there to do this kind of thing. But her discomfort of being left with the baby when she's so headstrong about helping anyone else because she thinks she's like good at it, was a particularly humanizing moment, I thought. So that was nice. And that actually came before the other little glimpse into something that we didn't know about yet, which is when she's in the bathroom and Javadi goes in and like ends up talking to her a little bit through the stalls. We see when she stands up that she has scars on her leg. Santos has what looks like a lot of scars on her legs, implying self-harm. And you know, maybe this is like what I mean, it's tough for me to say like how fresh they look necessarily, but the implication I got is that these weren't necessarily old. These seemed like something that in recent history she has done. Maybe, you know, the stress of like trying to keep up with everything in her job when she's trying to look like she's on top of everything, but maybe it is actually getting to her. And it's interesting that we're seeing her like have something that she, because obviously this isn't the same thing as Langdon. This is not a drug addiction. This is something else. But I do think they're comparable, and they're both ways of coping in some way. You know, it's a different reaction, but you know, unhealthy all the same. I don't want to say equally unhealthy because I don't know. Like people may argue with me on that. I don't know if one's more healthy than the other. I mean, they both seem pretty like self-destructive, you know, ultimately. But you know, interesting little thing, and I don't even know if any character's ever going to find out. But it does make you wonder though, because she does have a romantic relationship with someone else in the hospital. I mean, presumably Garcia would have seen these, or maybe that's why things are weird right now, is because she has noticed them. I mean, this is a possibility. But it definitely shows that there's a price of her trying to look like she is like on the ball all the time. Like there's a pressure there that in a lot of ways she's put on herself, because she acts so like tough, and she acts so like she's the best in the building at all times, kind of thing. So I'm curious to see where we go with that. I think there's some interesting nuance to that, which is to get this little glimpse of I guess, you know, and it's not even something that comes up. It's something we just get a little glimpse of in passing, and you know, once you notice it, you're like, oh shit, like something else is going on here. So no, I thought that was nicely done. Elsewhere, Abbott's back. He's been he keeps joking it's a hobby, but he in his off time is also like going out with SWAT teams for the police as like kind of the medical guy on site. So when they come in with like an officer who's been like shot in the neck or so, he was there. He did some like on site medical work, and they're kind of like, and he ends up like helping in the surgery. You know, he's there doing it with Robbie and whoever else. And Dr. Al does not seem thrilled by this. She's like, "Wait, you got a field medic helping you in here?" And Robbie's like, "Oh, he's one of the doctors here. He's fine. let him do his stuff." But she does not seem thrilled about it at any point. Although they do seem to bond a little bit because of their time, their war stories, as he puts it, in the Middle East. But interesting reactions there, and it's interesting to see the different reactions to Dr. Al from new characters when they pop in. Which, sticking with Abbott for a moment here, he ends up patching himself up because he actually got grazed, or he got hit with a bullet, but it wasn't like he didn't get shot, like the armor got it, but he's got a bruise and he needs to sort of like treat it a little bit. And it's actually Samira, Dr. Mohan, who finds him and ends up sort of like, you can't reach that yourself, I'll do this. And he's like, all right, but keep it off the books. I don't want to do paperwork either at the hospital or the police. So it's a nice little moment, and it also kind of taps off the one little plot line that she has this episode, which is that the guy who was worried about paying for healthcare tries to leave. She talks him out of it, but then when she goes to get him here, this is actually his room that Abbott's in. So he has ditched. He has left. Because he's already got a lot of debt, we find out in this episode, medical debt, and he doesn't want to add to it. And, you know, she'd prepared all these things for his, you know, insulin and various things for him to use at home. And Abbott suggests just sending an Uber to his house with it. And she's like, what, the hospital going to pay for that? And he's like, hell, I'll pay for it. So he gets some credit in the moment because he's like, yeah, fine, we'll just get it done. So it was a nice little bonding moment between two characters that, you know, I hadn't really like. I mean, they were together a little bit last season. You know, they were both in that final scene in like the park across the street at the end of the season 1 finale. But you know, it's not two characters. I mean, to be fair, Abbott's not really bonded with many characters outside of Robbie. Like all of these big scenes last season were pretty much with him. So it's just nice to have this little moment between two characters again. So that was cool. Cassie is still dealing with the woman with cancer who doesn't want to go home, and that's kind of a running thing still throughout this episode. The husband's back, and he's kind of he's upset that she doesn't want to come home, and he keeps asking Robbie if there's anything that he can do as a doctor to sort of force her to go home, and Robbie just kind of has to explain to him that like that's like the best thing you can do is to accept her wishes right now, as tough as that sounds. I don't really have much to say about this plot. It's just kind of like, it's almost like it's progressing at a natural pace, but all of the main points that it's kind of made have already been made in the previous episode. So it's not necessarily adding a whole lot to this particular episode, I felt, but you know, it is what it is. So and speaking of Robbie and Langdon, who we kind of get the conversation this episode, and I say kinda because it's not really a conversation. They do a moment here where Robbie's going in. It's actually when there's a patient coming in who had a propeller accident with a boat, and ends up with, as Garcia puts it, some Jurassic Park looking shit, because he's got like 4 big slashes down his side, so it looks like a dinosaur's clawed him. But when Robbie's going up, because the patient's arriving by helicopter, he goes into the elevator, and the shot just lingers on the doors closing, and you just know that someone's going to like stop the elevator and get in before the doors close, and then it takes like a millisecond to realize it's definitely going to be Langdon, because it means they're going to be trapped in the elevator for the ride up. And seemingly they don't say anything to each other in the elevator, because we just cut after they have the awkward moment of realizing they're both there. We just go to the roof. But it's as the helicopter's coming down, so the loud propellers going, Langdon just yells at him, hey, I'm just going to say it. I screwed up. I'm sorry. It'll never happen again. I let you down. I let the patients down. He says his thing. And Robbie's response is a little cold. He says, I'm glad you got the help you needed, but I don't know if I want you working in my ER. And then the patient's there, so they have to just go with the patient. And then what's interesting about this is that it kind of spooks Langdon a bit, where when they get into the surgery or the operating room or whatever, I don't even think either of those terms is right. You know what I mean? They get into the room. Like, Langdon's kind of like shaken by it. He's nervous, and he's like, Robbie's asking the questions, and Whitaker's answering some of them and so on, but he's directing the questions at Langdon. And Langdon's kind of hesitating, like he's not snappy, he's not getting to the answers as quickly, and it's like he's shaking, and it's almost like Robbie's testing him. And at the worst possible time, Langdon's kind of freezing up a little bit. And it's not because I think he doesn't know the answers to these. I think he's just kind of shaken by what Robbie said to him, that he feels like this pressure, and I think it's getting to him, and I think it's he's. They get there in the end, ultimately, but it does kind of feel like, it's had an impact. Robbie's affected him. And what's so interesting about this is that he's being borderline, I mean, I don't want to say he's being cruel to Langdon. I think that's maybe a little harsh, because that implies more malice. I don't think it's that, but I think there is this, like, this trust has been broken. When Langdon says, I betrayed you and I let you down, and he's been saying that to everyone, and some people have said, no, you didn't betray me, or it's not a big deal, you've learned, whatever. The one that he feels the most betrayed, the one that actually feels that way, absolutely, is Robbie. He is the one that absolutely feels like he was betrayed by Langdon, and his reaction last season kind of goes along with that, so that makes sense. So this idea that he's not, like, giving him the forgiveness, he's not saying what Langdon wants to hear back, is, it's hurting a bit, obviously, but it does feel a little cold, and it does feel unlike Robbie in some respects, because I think that contrasts really nicely with a little scene that he has with Santos, where he asks if Santos is doing all right and whatnot, and it's pleasant enough. But interestingly, the conversation turns to Whitaker, and Whitaker, like, she says that, because he says, hey, how's the house or the home life with Whitaker, and Santos says that, I mean, he's weirder than you expect, but I don't even see him that much. He spends a lot of time at, I think it was Amy's, and he's like, Amy, Whitaker's got a girlfriend, and his eyes light up. He's like a dad who's just found out that his son's got a girlfriend. Like, his eyes light up. It's like an adorable little moment. And then she's like, nah, not okay, maybe a little bit. It's hard to tell. And he's like, what do you mean? And she explains the context of this. There's this widow of this farmer, and like, Whitaker helped with the husband's death, and then he helped when the baby was arriving. Now he spends all the weekends at her farm, and like, he's taken all this in, and he looks a little bit perplexed by it. And she says something, I don't know, to the effect of like, yeah, I mean, yeah, he really is our Huckleberry, and he's like, yeah, but he's our Huckleberry. I'll talk to him, and they have a little fist bump, and it's a really nice little moment, because I've said before and repeatedly throughout this season, the heartwarming nature of Robbie and Whitaker's kind of like mentor and like, pupil bond is very, very heartwarming and sweet. And this idea that he's heard this from Santos, and he's like, oh, maybe I need to talk to him about what this relationship he has with this widow actually is, because it sounds like it might be a little bit weird and unhealthy. And maybe it isn't. Maybe when he talks to Whitaker, it'll actually be okay. It'll sound reasonable enough. But I like that he's looking out for him, and kind of like reaffirms to Santos, yeah, but he's one of us, right? So don't be a shit to him. Which, she seems to respond to in her own way. So it's a really nice little character moment. So, and it's really nice to have that moment because of how kind of cold he's being with Langdon, right? Because I think the audience pretty much all want him to forgive Langdon at this point, which is kind of a nice feeling in and of itself, that it's done its job as a TV show of making him feel redemptive, of him trying to do the right thing. And understanding why he's hesitant to forgive him and sort of make things okay again, but at the same time, kind of want it and be rooting for Langdon. And it'll be a really nice moment if it comes, and I hope it comes. In fact, that's actually how that conversation with Santos starts, is that Robbie asks her if Langdon has spoken to her yet today. And she says no. Did he say something? And he's like, no, I'm just asking. And you get, like, it has to be coming, right? It has to be coming. So they've done the Robbie one, kind of, and I get why they've done it early now, because it wasn't like this. Because I think in my head, when he finally had the conversation, it would maybe be a big long scene, but it would eventually lead to some sort of closure. This did not have closure. They did it early in the middle because they know they're going to do more with it throughout the season. And Langdon tries to talk to him again, does not work. Robbie just like back to it and walks out, and that's it. That's all we get. So yeah, so that's that. So no, good stuff. So who have I not talked about yet, character-wise? I mean, yeah, Whittaker's around. Doesn't have a ton this episode, and to an extent, some of the others. But I mean, I think Javadi and King both get a little bit. Javadi gets a scene with her dad, who we've not met before, I don't think. And he's also a doctor, but he's a bit more easygoing, and he's talking her up to one of his colleagues, and getting her, name in there. But he seems to be a lot more open to to her picking what she wants to do, like what type of medicine or doctoring she wants to get into. So he seems a bit warmer. In fact, he even says at one point that his colleague's the smartest person that he knows, and he turns to Javadi and says, "Don't tell your mother," which is funny on its own, because then he's like, seriously, don't tell her. But it's also a good callback, because Javadi said the same thing about not telling her mum something back in the season 1 finale when she was drinking. So I like I like this idea that everyone around that woman is all like, don't tell her. Like, don't tell her I said something or did something she wouldn't like. Which does suggest maybe she's a bit too controlling, perhaps. But it was a funny little callback. So there's that, and then King, Mel, she had, again, not a ton this episode, but she did have a couple of scenes. One with Robbie, where Robbie just tries to reassure her about the deposition and say, hey, you're one of the best students I've ever had. You're not in danger of losing your job. And that's also another sweet Robbie scene, is him doing that. But there's also a scene where she's having a video call with her sister. Her sister's got a stomach ache, and she's asking her some symptoms, and she's like, well, I'll go speak to the nurse and like have her call me about it. And she's a little concerned, but her sister does know that she looks terrible. They're like, hey, your face looks weird, what's going on? And we know it's because she's worried about the deposition. But clearly she doesn't feel like she can talk to her sister about that, because maybe it's a little bit more complex to explain and whatnot. But she obviously gets that little talk from Robbie. And I get, so it's continuing these things along a little bit. I guess if this episode was very good, and I guess if I have a critique, if anything, is it does feel like maybe 2 or 3 characters have had a few episodes in a row where they've had little, right? And it was fine last episode, because last episode was a cool case where it was like, no, we're focusing on the nurses, so a lot of the doctors are taking the back seat. But there's definitely a few characters where I think they've had maybe 3 in a row now where they've only really had background stuff or just one little scene. And maybe it's just because they're juggling so many characters, they're juggling whatever else is going on. But, I think, King's not had a lot the last few episodes. I don't think Samira's had a lot the last 3 episodes. Javadi's been kind of on the low side the last few episodes. Yeah, I wouldn't say Whittaker. Whittaker didn't have much this one, but he had more than most of he had a couple of great moments last episode, and he tends to get a lot of focus. So that's I don't think he's lacking for focus. But maybe some of the characters have maybe been a little underserved, a few in a row. And I think for one episode it's not a big deal. I think maybe 3 in a row feels a little bit like a trend. And I'm hoping that we kind of like course correct just a little bit with that going on. As far as some of the other characters, there's not a lot of the newbies, Joy and Ogilvy, but she does school them at one point. They bring in like a football player who fainted during practice, and this also leads to this idea that there's going to be a lot of heat exhaustion for the day, because it's July 4th, there's people outside, it's summer, so they prep a room just to treat people who have collapsed from heat. But Joy schools Ogilvy on something, and it's like, whoa, she cares about this way more than she does about most things. And there's a funny little moment where the patient, who I think's either a high schooler or maybe college, but he kind of like gives a little look to Joy, and Joy's like, oh, not my type, sunshine, and just kind of turns back around. And I thought that was funny. But I was laughing because as she was like going through the history of this condition, or no, it wasn't even this condition. It was a very specific potential condition that was very rare that Ogilvy brought up, and then Joy was just explaining why it wouldn't be that, like why it was highly, highly, highly unlikely. And there was just like Samira's in the room. She's like the doctor in the room, and the look in her face as she's looking back at Ogilvy, waiting for like well, have you got a rebuttal for that? Because she just schooled your ass, was a really funny look on her face. So props for that as well. So no, yeah, good stuff. Also, actually, there was more stuff with the deaf lady. Yeah, that's something that Santos is. I guess that's the thing she's still kind of dropping the ball on, is just how kind of like she's just given up immediately every time something's not working there. They've got like a screen with an interpreter on it, and that starts glitching out, and she can't get like the like all of the sentences, and she's like, oh well, this thing's not working, I guess we'll have to. And she actually does write a message down for the lady saying that, oh, we'll have to wait, and but in the meantime we'll do a CT. And the woman's like pointing at it like, I don't know what that means. What is this? So, and Robbie actually tells her not to do this later. She's like, hey, until we actually get the interpreter, don't put the patient through any unnecessary radiation, which seems like a good tactic to take, to be fair. That sounds like a sensible thing to say. So I think that's fair. And there is an interpreter eventually, but Santos ditches and says, oh, I'll be back in a minute. So it feels like, you know, this poor deaf lady is having like just the worst delays possible waiting to be seen to properly. Maybe there'll be consequences for that. Maybe she's going to get into more pain or something, or maybe something more serious, and maybe there'll be some fallout. But yeah, so I just that popped in my head. I'd forgotten to mention that when I was talking about Santos, because again, a lot of little things sometimes for some of these characters. But yeah, no, good episode though. Unfortunately, the only thing going against it is that last episode was one of the best episodes the show's had. So by nature, this one had a lot to live up to, and it kind of fought its ground quite well. You know, I think the ending is exciting for the future of the season. I think they handled the sexual assault patient or victim with good care and direction, and I thought that was presented in a manner that really worked. And put you in the position, in particular, it put you in the position of Dana and Emma trying to be respectful and talk her through it and help her, but also feel the silent sort of frustration that she might not make the choices that you think she should, right? And that you know, what leads to Dana like breaking down in tears by the end, I think is really well done. So yeah, and even, you know, Santos had a bit more complexity in what was presented from her this episode, both good and bad, which was nice. It feels a bit more fleshed out, and yeah, some nice little sort of mentor moments from Robbie, which contrast nicely with the Langdon stuff. So yeah, good stuff. That is episode 7 of The Pitt. So, and the betting board I don't think is completely done, because they still have to like wait and see how many patients they get. That's part of the bet after all, but we have the reason. The reason's been locked down, so good stuff. And you know, I'm looking forward to seeing how this functions. Even like the some of the phones weren't working by the sounds of it at the end, which means like just something as simple as calling up to like surgery. Like, is that going to be like, oh, someone has to like run up there with a message now? Is that what's happening? Are we getting some old cups and string sort of? Walkie-talkies. Maybe they'll get some walkie-talkies actually. They'll get like an old radio system they can use. That you would think they may not have it at the ready, but I wonder if they expect it to go on for a while, if they'll break out some old school walkie-talkie tech. That could be fun. Or just use their personal phones actually, like their mobile phones, their cell phones, which obviously still work. So, be curious to see what situations we get into because of that. But anyway, that's my thoughts on this episode of The Pitt. Let me know what you thought of it in the comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Helps out a bunch if you do. And of course, you can support everything over in Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV, or via YouTube membership. But Patreon is maybe the better choice because you get access to all the movie show bonuses as well. So check out MailFuzz Movies for all the movie podcasts. You get me talking to other people about horror movies, sci-fi movies, and whatever else. So thank you very much. I'll see you guys next time. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?